So in this khutbah, we wanted to focus on the importance of Iman bil Ghaib, or belief in the unseen. Specifically, of that belief, we wanted to focus on the issue of deen, the meaning of deen. Surah Al-Fatiha has a lot to do with the reward and the punishment that is levied out or given out for what it is that we do in this world. One of the characteristics that we find of the Quran that is extremely important when we study the Quran from the angle of how it is that it was revealed, which is different than how it is presented in the Mus'haf. In the Mus'haf, it has its order. But how the Salaf, how they came across the Quran was as it was revealed. So there's a certain educational set of objectives, yani ahadaf tarbawiyah, that the Quran is coming and bringing. And so when we read the Quran itself, we have to always remember that there's a difference between reading the Quran from the angle of the academic approach that we see many times in the study of Islam, which is to read it one ayah at a time and they separate it out from its context. And then the ulama, they engage in a series of discussions over what it means. That's not the way that the Quran was approached. The Quran was approached within a certain type of context. And so when we look at the context of revelation, which is different than how we look at it in the Mus'haf, we see certain key themes are repeated over and over again. That's why the foundation of Iman is found in the Meccan revelation. The whole of the deen is found in the Meccan revelation, and everything else that comes after that is tafasil or details, as is stated by Imam Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi, rahmatullahi alayhi, and many other scholars. And so when we look at the revelation in the earliest period, how was it that Iman was taught? And here, Iman is a much more broad term than just focusing on the word Tawheed by itself. And many times today we focus on the issue of Tawheed and we forget that that comes in a context. That Tawheed, how it came in the beginning of the revelation, how Iman was understood. There was what we call in the Arabic language a rabit. There was that which tied belief to give an importance to the dignity of the human being. That's why if we were to go with the whole concept of what is the first surah to be revealed, the ulama, they debate between Surah Al-Alaq and Surah Al-Fatiha. Either way, if you were to give it Surah Al-Alaq, it's very clear that the human being is what is the first discussion. And if you were to give it the first to be revealed, Surah Al-Fatiha, then the relation of the human being to Rabb al-Alameen still comes to the fore. But the surah or the chapters of the Quran that are being revealed to reconstruct who the human being is have every relationship not only to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, but to the weak of the society. Look at Surah Al-Ma'un. And look at the way that the Quran is talking about the reality of Iman being tied to concern for the poor, concern for the orphan. And so there is this reality of believing in good, yani al-Iman bil khair, that our deeds have weight. The smallest of our deeds, they have weight. And not only that, the Quran leverages a certain type of deed. The deed which is concerned with those that are the most weak in the society. That's the only way that Jahiliyyah is going to be transformed. A re-understanding of who the human being is, and an understanding of good itself. Al-Iman bil Ghaib here, we're talking about believing that our deeds have weight. And this meaning becomes more and more established when we look at Surah Al-Qariyah. By the time Surah Al-Qariyah is revealed, there's a set of surahs that come. All of them have something to do with time, whether it's Al-Fajr, whether it's Asr. All of them have to do with the human being conscious of time, either time as a whole or part of the time. And here we begin to see that the Quran is developing the sense of responsibility. So then when we read Surah Al-Fatiha, whether we read Maliki Yawmiddin or Maliki Yawmiddin, we have this understanding that we are responsible for our time in the dunya and for what it is that we do. And so then the Quran is pushing that from the sifat, or from the characteristics of the believers, is that they make their time that which they invest in accumulating good for themselves in this world and the hereafter. This was a society that didn't believe that good, especially on behalf of the poor, had any weight. Remember, the one that had status in the society and the one that had power with his tribe was the one that had weight. So this idea that I take care of my brother without anything in return, and this brother is not from my tribe, this brother is not from my people, but is a human being, was another type of conception. The Quran is instilling this change in people first, that is not just a matter of just believing in the existence of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. There's متطلبات. هذا الإيمان لديه متطلبات وواجبات. And it's not just the issue of saying that this Iman has certain things that are an obligation that we believe with regard to who Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is, but rather Iman has to have its fruit. يعني ما هي ثمرة الإيمان. And the fruit of that Iman, it shows itself in the fact that the character of the person of belief is the one that believes in good. The one that believes in scaling the good that they do in this world. And we have mentioned on other occasions in other places. If you think about the reality as an example, that if you were to have $1,000 in your pocket in cash, and you were to remove that $1,000 from your pocket and you were to give it in a particular direction, like paying your bills, or like, for instance, you give it to another human being. When you go back into your wallet and you go and you do your search, that $1,000 is gone. It's not there to be found. Now in the case of the bills, is for that which you use in it, there's no return on that. ما في عوض. Now in the case that you gave it to someone, maybe you gave it as a loan or whatever it may be. But what is it that changes that reality? What is it that gives meaning to that infaq, to that giving, if not Iman itself? That when you give is with the intention of seeking the face of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, because you want that which you have done, as far as that giving is concerned, to be with Allah. As an investment for yourself. That's the reality when we look at the Iman bil Ghaib. How the action of the human being is transformed. Because the dilemma that we have in this case is the dilemma of intention when it comes to the issue of giving. That intention is not only in the issue of giving money that makes it make sense for you, that $1,000 left and it is there with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But there's also another expectation on the part of the believer, that that type of action is an action. That's al-ibadah bil-mal. That's worship using your wealth. But there's an expectation that comes from that on the scales, you have something. That's just an example. And then what about the value of the smile? Or what about the value of removing something which is a hardship from a believer, whether it's from the road or from their life or whatever it may be? How is it that that has value? See, the danger and the changes of the meaning of Iman, the zakat, has been transformed to a tax write-off. Sadaqah has been transformed to influence and leverage. The danger is that we present ourselves and our deeds in such a way, yes, we can encourage others to do good by presenting that I'm giving 10,000 or I'm giving 20,000. That in itself is not the issue. But the problem comes when the meaning changes of that act of ibadah, and it becomes talib al-jah. It becomes the seeking of position. And all of that comes back to the issue of the unseen. All of that comes back to the issue of the status of the heart. So remember, we said that the Quran is establishing this concept of concern for humanity and doing good, and the human being weighing time, your time on earth. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is giving us all these signs in the dunya, whether the changing of the seasons or the rising of the sun, so to speak, or the setting of the sun, or the midday from Fajr to Asr. So that we take account of ourselves. Why? Because by the time we get to Surah Al-Qari'ah, we have a reality of belief that is being established, which many times we don't move beyond the symbolism of it. Belief in the scales. لكي يرسخ هذا الإيمان في قلوبنا نحن نحتاج أن نتدبر على آيات الله. So that aqidah is firm in our hearts, we have to reflect a little on the ayat of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So when the Quran is dividing humanity into two categories, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. The one whose scale is weighty and heavy, the deeds count of that person because their deeds have qabul, acceptance with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Then the type of life that that person has is the life that their heart has been seeking, in which they find that contentment and that peace which they couldn't find with completion in the dunya. But the story, people, is not just a story of making you feel good. The Quran operates with the targhib and tarhib. فَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُمُّهُ حَاوِيَةٌ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. For the believers in this case, just about a quarter of a line is mentioned with regard to the reward of the believer and the position of the people of Iman. But for the unbeliever, ولدينا قاعدة في قضية قراءة القرآن. We have a principle, so we shake you up a little bit. This issue is not about applying the Quran to the kafir and putting ourselves in a position that we feel safe with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is about applying the Quran to ourselves and seeing if we have these sifat which describe the people of kufr. Looking at our condition and seeing what is our position with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This morning, before Jum'ah, my son calls crying to me, not being able to speak. Ya Baba, completely shut down. So my son-in-law takes the phone for a second to relieve him. And then he says, Uncle Zakaria was found dead. That's the reality of death. يعني القضية مش لعبة. The situation is not a situation of play. The reality of life is a reality of seriousness, because no one knows at what moment the ruh will be taken from him or her, and then they have to take account for how it is that they lived in the dunya. The quality of Iman, as it was understood in the first generation, was something that changed them. It had an impact on them. It had an impact on that generation and transformed the condition that they were in. And so that community was a community which the effects of Iman were visible in the way that the people dealt with each other and the way that they responded to the call of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. As for the person whose scales are light, in other words, they fail to produce. We have a simplicity when it comes to the issue of Iman. Al-Iman qawl wa amal. Al-Iman يعني التصديق والتقرير والعمل بالجوارح. It's simple in that regard. Without getting into all of the debates in ilm al-kalam and this group and that group, is believing and having certainty in your heart, and you confess that to the believers and to those in society. And then not only do you confess it, not only are you proud of your identity as believing in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, you don't shy from it, you don't hide from it, you don't put the flag behind your back, but then our deeds testify to the reality of Iman. This is a dangerous position. Because remember that the position of the people of Nifaq, and in this case, the people of Kufr, the people of hypocrisy, is that what it is that is in their hearts, it doesn't match what it is that they manifest. And the problem that we have as a community, I begin with myself, is that what we say we believe in our heart, it doesn't match up with our deeds. And this is the process of Iman, in balancing out the scale and increasing our deeds to make our Iman firm. And so at the end of the day, those whose scale is light, then the Quran says that the eternity is to be plunged into the abyss of the hellfire. And what will make you realize what it is a blazing fire. In other words, it's not just a good, make you feel good message. It's a message about calling us to account a responsibility. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم الحمد لله رب